So this entire unit that we're learning is all about finding patterns, but writing the equations for patterns so that we can actually solve using these patterns. So my very first thing is I have a pattern on the board right now. We've got purple dots and then we've got green dots here. We want to identify, well, what if I wanted to know if I have, 27 purple dots, how many green dots would I have? Now, unfortunately, that's going to take me a long time, right, to try and count up to 27. So we actually want to come up with an equation that can represent this pattern, and then we can just plug in whatever number we need, and it'll spit out an answer. So before we can do that, though, we have to create something called a table of values. Now, a table of values is going to be pretty much us just charting all the values that we see in our pattern. So over here, I'm going to put purple, and over here, I'm going to put green. And we'll use a little visual here, purple and green. And another way we can represent this is we've got X and Y. So now my next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to write down my values that I have. So for every one purple dot, I have one green dot. The second one, I have 3 purple dots. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 green dots. And for this next one, I have 5 purple dots. And I don't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 green dots. So there's obviously a pattern, right? But the pattern that we're looking for is actually the relationship between the two. How did I get from purple to green? How did I get from 3 to 5? How did I get from 5 to 9? And it has to be the same pattern. Now, in the previous years, we've learned the guess and check method, but there's actually a simpler way to figure this out. So what we're going to do is we're going to use something called slope-intercept form. We're going to use the equation y equals mx plus b. And that equation is always going to work for us to find the pattern. So if I take a look, first thing we got to figure out, step number 1, is find what m is. Now, m is equal to the slope, which we calculate with rise over run. Now, the rise is going to be our y, and we're going to figure out, how do I get from 1 to 5? Well, plus 4. How do I get from 5 to 9? Plus 4. So my rise is going to be 4. Now, my run is the other one. My run is my x, so what's my run here? Well, plus 2. Plus 2. So my run is 2. And then remember that this symbol right here is division. 4 divided by 2, well, that's going to be 2. So our m equals 2. So that's step number 1. We solved for m. Step number 2 is we got to solve for b. So we're going to use the following equation. Y equals mx plus b. Well, we know what m is, right? We just solved it, so we can put a 2 in there for m, y, x, and we still don't know what b is. So our equation's coming together, but it needs a little bit more work. So now what we do is in place of y and in place of x, we actually have values from our table of values that we can put in for those two things. So we can choose any of these numbers that are in our table of values here. 1 and 1, 3 and 5, 5 and 9, doesn't matter. So I'm going to say I'm going to use the 5 for x, and I'm going to use the 9 for y. Now, they have to be at the same level, okay? So now, when I rewrite this, I have 9 equals 2, and then x is going to be 5 plus b. Now, remember, this isn't 25. Though what's happening between the 2 and the x is we're multiplying. So this is 9 equals 2 times 5 plus b. Well, 2 times 5 we can actually solve. That's 10. 10 plus b equals 9. And then pretty much we're just trying to figure out 10 plus what gives me 9. Well, to figure that out, I can isolate the variable, get that letter by itself. So I do the opposite. I have plus 10, I minus 10 from both sides. b is going to equal 9 minus 10, which is negative 1. And so now I have both m and I have b. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to take both of these and come up with my final pattern equation. Y equals m, 2, x plus b, which is negative 1, And remember, it makes no sense to write plus negative. We can just write 2x minus 1. And that is our pattern. So now if we go back up to the top, our question was, well, what happens when we have 27 purple dots? Well, purple is x. So let's just replace x with 27. So y equals 2x minus 1. Well, wherever there's an x, we're going to put in a 27. So y equals 2 times x, so 2 times 27 minus 1. And 2 times 27 is 54, minus 1 is going to be 53. So if there are 27 purple dots, there will be 53 green dots to match this pattern. All right? So the main part is we need this equation here that we just came up with. That's the equation for the pattern. And then we can actually use the equation to solve questions. And that is really the biggest part of representing patterns using the linear relation.